So hello.
Wow, it's been quite a week and quite a day.
100%. Every day feels like it should be Friday, and it's still not actually Friday.
I know.
I would fully agree with that.
I don't know how anyone's gotten much work done, really.
I've gotten a lot of work done, but I'm not getting a lot of sleep. And I wake up every day and I look tired.
Like trading one for the other, yeah.
I'm doing a lot of work. It's just not the work I planned on doing this week.
Yeah.
There's a whole different set of things came up, but
Totally. Okay. Wait, so what's happening right now?
Right? Our agenda.
Did you get I put the agenda in the chat if you want to open that and lead us.
Sure, I shall do so. Should I share a screen or just chat?
Your call.
Okay, cool. I'll just chat about the things. So yesterday was the Docs Clinic, and where we did a big old walkthrough on, hey, this is the new Docs issue template. Isn't this cool? Opening an issue. Awesome. And then we took the long journey through the mountain on contributing a PR if wanting to fix one or two lines and what that results in. But we all made it to the end, and we high-fived, and we drank lots of water, and we were rehydrated. And so it's a pretty great video, and I'll provide a link to that actually on Twitch. If I could, let's see. There's so many videos on here already. So there's my face. Okay.
I thought that it was really good though, because it highlighted some stuff that I was also feeling like pre-commit, and some other things that I'm like, is it just me?
It certainly was not.
I do
feel better, and then I don't.
I don't know if this is the right place to discuss this, and it's okay if it's not. We can table it for later if we need. But given the decision not to push the Python 3 updates to a lot of the modules and to just do it gradually as people update them, that's a little bit of an impediment for people who want to make just docs changes to the modules. So I think it'd be worth discussing maybe having a systematic approach to updating the modules, gradually or something, without overwhelming the system. But I figure that's maybe worth discussing, but we don't have to do it here because that's a little bit out of the scope of this group.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's the whole, we have a handful of PRs right now. We have a few of them, and because they're so. And then it's us juggling the what'll happen with merge conflicts too, and I imagine that's probably has that been the main concern, Sage? I imagine is the
right now, yeah,
merge conflict hell, yeah.
Yeah. At this time in the release cycle is when I go, oh, right. Yes.
But I also agree. I also agree with that idea of going. How do we? I like that we talked about the issues in the Docs Clinic, in case they're like, whoa, I don't want to go backpacking this year, and we could be like, don't worry, just give us directions and we could help with it. So I guess that's the intermediate, or how would you word it? The current state of things.
Yeah, and so I was actually just pinging Wang on the side about this and talking to some other people about kind of what we can do there. And I think that is probably something that's going to come up in the next planning session, because it's painful. And I think we already have some things we can do. So I think we'll talk about making that more formal in our pipeline process somehow.
That'd be great. And I think that would be the only thing I'd ask at this point is just, can we consider it for the future, you know? So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
What's the challenge? I think
Just the whole rebasing and, you know, merge conflict hell that we go into as we go into code freeze, kind of where we are. And then also we still, this group probably doesn't know as much about it, although I'd love to get this group more involved in the docs tests, but it's also about us keeping the tests green, as well as merge conflicts and getting everything merged and in what order and things like that. And so there's some things there that I think that that wheel has already been built once. We could copy some things that other projects have done to go a little faster there.
And I piggyback off of what you're saying, Sage, just to add
Yeah.
a little bit more clarity. So the issue that came up is Derek in the docs clinic demoed a very simple, he was just making very minor docs changes to the Kubernetes modules where he was just fixing some RST formatting. But because of the pre-commit process, it goes in and cleans up all the Python 2 to Python 3 code. So it becomes more than just a docs change. And so then it's no longer just a docs change, it's a code change when all you were doing was changing the docs. And so so we just need to figure out how to resolve that, because it would be nice to just be able to make just docs changes. So
yeah, and I know the reason that we did the way that we're currently doing it, but I'm also not convinced that it's the right way, because before the challenge, when we blackened the code base, that was a pretty significant change in formatting, like just across the entire system. Like so everything had a merge conflict, and it was not entirely clear what was wrong. But with this, I don't think it's nearly the same kind of difficulty as like with black, because it's not actually changing formatting unless black complains afterwards. You know, it's really just changing a line of code. And so it's, unless somebody has changed that same line of code, there shouldn't be any merge conflicts. So I don't.
Yeah, shouldn't. I think we should revisit it though.
Yeah,
Just
and we could actually automate testing it relatively easy, because there are only 600 of them now. So you could easily
only.
I mean, the script that I have that rebases, you could easily adapt that to say, oh yeah,
Right.
go ahead and get all of the open PRs, rebase them on master, and see what kind of, after running the hook, and see what happens.
Right.
Oh, that's actually really cool. That's actually a really cool concept. If we did like because Elisa was suggesting, like, what if we went in waves with files of having those adjustments done? Because if you were rebasing, then you would know what PRs were just now impacted by like that
This being merged.
Yeah.
And in the past, I've had some teams that were doing merging kind of like what we're doing, and they even had like it's not really a dashboard, it was just a list, but it was automatically populated, so you could also kind of see it, and you could also see it get rebased, so you kind of track and be like, oh right, okay, just a little mini like list of things that are like, so these got affected, and it was an output and an artifact, so we could also show people, hey, we automatically did this. So if something is really wrong here, after we start getting, closer to merging it, we could go back and see if somebody touched it or if it was just a bot. And that was kind of nice to have. That's, but I think that what Wayne's got is something that we just need to look at and put into how we're doing things now, sort of on a broader spectrum, right? And then also I'd like to look at the just pre-commit in general. I don't know how we got so messy with pre-commit exactly, and I don't know that Pedro's fix is the right one or anything, but we need to do something to fix it, because that one's not working.
And I think that wasn't Pedro also working on a GitHub action idea, like of
He
Yeah,
was, but I'm not sure if that's right or not. I just don't know.
because basically the idea of the action is to do what I just described, but over time, which sounds terrible. Just do it all at once. And then we have one single commit,
Yeah.
dropping all the Pi2 code, and then it can actually complain about the stupid 6 things that it doesn't remove.
Whatever that
yeah, I
is.
know. Like, can't there just be a one more pre-commit step that just goes, I will fix this if this is found?
I think we just need to fix that. Yeah, that's why I keep looking at that and I'm like, I think we just need to fix that. And but I also noticed in the backlog that there's some other things happening on 6 as well. So I don't know that it's just pre-commit, this pre-commit thing that's happening that we're not fixing. I think it may be elsewhere, but that's a side note.
But it does bring up one thing that, though, about the idea of having pre-commit auto fix things is that will mean that if people are contributing who did not run like Black and iSort and that kind of thing in the future, it would mean that the GitHub action would automatically go, oh, you didn't run pre-commit locally, and could auto fix it if it didn't find anything that needed to be manually fixed. Like so it could provide that potential benefit too.
Yeah, I think there's some benefits to be gained there for sure. I just think we need to get all those pieces right. And I'm not totally sure what all those are exactly. I think that what Wayne's talking about is better.
Yeah.
And even Pedro agrees. And I'm like, that's fine. I think that's great. Let's do that then.
Awesome.
Let's put that in place. So yeah, I want to talk about that in our next planning session, which I think is actually a little ways out, kind of given all the things that are occurring in SaltConf and releases and blah, blah, and this week, you know? And so we will eventually do that. That's gonna not coincide with the Everest planning that's happening with the SSE team. So I'm a little concerned that like a team like documentation is actually gonna get hit with 2 rounds of planning.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sorry, upfront.
Understandable.
Not really sure what else to say about that, but we do still have a ton of stuff in the backlog that we didn't even get to for magnesium. Some of that stuff is actually like, ooh, we really should have gotten to this and we didn't. So I'm interested to also open it up to this greater work group and hopefully recruit people from the community as well and be like, if you're interested in documentation though, here's some stuff that we'd love to have help on. Some of it's RST files, some of it's bigger, but I think it'd be great to have more resources.
Yeah, that's actually something that I was thinking about when it came to the acquisition, and there's going to be a lot more eyes on our software, and as a result, a lot more eyes on our docs.
Yep.
And which could mean hopefully more people going, hey, I'd like to help and jump into the working group.
Yeah, I think that the clinic is something that we probably need to continue to do, maybe even think about a regular time. I don't know that it works to do like the test clinic like Wayne's doing, because I just don't know that that's the right thing to do for you guys. You guys would have to come up with that like once a month, whatever. But I think
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I agree. So since you're bringing it up, we should talk about next steps for the docs clinics. I thought everything worked really well, but I agree that like a cadence as regular as the testing one is maybe not necessary. And so I was curious what we think about whether we want to continue them, and if so, what kind of cadence would maybe be effective for it. And also maybe what format, like what things we might cover in them in the future. Ideas?
Yeah, like what's funny is when I do think of cadence, I'm like, I at the same time could go, oh, we have enough content that we technically could do the same cadence if we wanted to. But at the same time, we're also, doing a ton of work. So it's more like availability, right? And so, yeah, it's a good question because, well, for one, I imagine that, so the docs working group is a salt stack docs working group, not necessarily salt. And one big focus honestly has to be things like Tiamat and the item world and their own documentation and improving things like that. But from a Docs Clinic perspective, yeah, I suppose it would be looking at the issue backlog. I don't know. I feel like it would sort of be like a mix of, I imagine content would it'd be like a mix of triage. Well, if it was like once a month, then we'd be able to go, hey, let's select the issue or issues that we want to go through that in that clinic and just do it live.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking. So it's a lot like that we don't have enough test coverage. And so we're plucking things out in the test clinic to kind of start writing some tests. And similar thing for docs, we'll never be finished, right? It's like laundry and dishes. This is always going to be going on. There's always going to be docs to write. There's always going to be docs to fix. That's part of it. It's about taking small bites at a time. And so that's why I say it's a good thing to have a cadence, but I do know that it may not work to do it as frequently as weekly, but I would encourage you guys to try to do it every other week or at least once a month and really have something picked out for it. Like maybe even have a few issues that are like, this one's actually really interesting because, and kind of get into it so you can show some people, you know, even if no one shows up or has something to contribute to it, you have some things kind of in your backlog to go back to say, what I wanted to show this and report it because it's a common problem or it's a common thing that you run into with docs. Or
I already
right?
actually have a good idea for one. Is that it would require maybe a little bit of research or speaking to a core person too beforehand,
Sure.
But it's that big issue of all the undocumented minion and master config options. Because if we could, because if it's like, let's start hammering some of these out, and because that would be a good way to lead people into going, oh, I use this option actually.
Yeah.
I had to research it and figure it out. And if they could see how we're completing that documentation, or even asking, this site could open a docs issue, or this is the main docs issue where we've listed all of them. If you could please provide to the conversation, because that's a big one that. If we actually had a baseline where it became fully documented, we could have automated tests in place to make sure that whenever a new edition happened, that a test would run to go, was it documented in the proper places?
Right.
Because we won't have to run into that problem again.
Quick clarification. Did you say the undocumented master and minion configurations? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I'll find the issue actually itself.
I don't know if that's its title, but that's what it's about.
Yeah, no worries. I just wanted to make sure I captured it correctly.
And there's a lot of, I think, examples like that, but I do think that some people may come to a clinic like that, just like the test clinic, where they opened a PR and they don't have documentation in their PR, and they're like, I don't know how to write documentation for this, or I don't know what to write for this, or they wrote some and you guys start reviewing it and you're like, why don't you come to the clinic? You know?
Yeah, right.
That's a good way to promote that, you know, just to kind of help them and be like, we'll review this for you and help you with the formatting or whatever it is that's on it.
I like that because there could be almost like, here's the content we have ready to do by default, but then it's really an open clinic to assist people, and that's our fallback is the other stuff. I really like that a lot. Then it's properly, calling it a clinic makes more sense then, because then we're helping people.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if we just don't get anybody that's coming, you know, to that for help, we're providing help in sort of a general way by kind of going through the backlog and showing them some things that would be helpful to just know, like, you're going to run into this pre-commit problem right now, right? And this is kind of how you work through it or whatever. And that's great, you know. Right. And I think there's some other nuances with documentation and just getting set up to submit a PR that we could dive into even more if we wanted to, right?
Yeah, I was just gonna chime in and say, you know, as I've been working through the test clinic, like, that's one of the things I've seen is even though probably at least half the time, you know, I'm not working on something with somebody specifically, you know, there are a couple of people who are actually starting to just like watch the stream to be like, okay, so this is how things are going. Okay, how you do it. Yeah. And then two, just the process of actually speaking the things out loud as I'm doing them 9 times out of 10, you know, I'm making things way better than they would have been normally. And I would also say probably 9 times out of the 10, as I've gone through and added tests, I have discovered other missing places where it's like, oh yeah, there's no test here, and oh, surprise, there's a bug because this. And, you know, so by adding tests and walking through it, like, that gets exposed. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess we're gonna stop here and write a couple more tests and fix this bug and then carry on. And so I think, you know, with the doc clinic, we'll see a lot of the same things happen with our documentation, is, you know, going through that process of saying, oh yeah, so I'm gonna rewrite this, and I don't like how this is worded because it's saying this, and we could make it better with this example or whatever. And going through that, I expect we'll get a lot of benefit that we don't, that's not exactly obvious right now.
I think that some people are afraid to write documentation at times.
Oh yeah.
Especially if English isn't their first language. And that's where I think you guys really come in to play with your talents to say, we don't expect you to have perfect English. That's why we're here. We're gonna help you. You know, that's what we do. Yeah, and I just wanna showcase that too.
Yeah, just kind of a community service. Like if you're intimidated by the docs, that's okay. We'll help you. That kind of thing. Yeah. And I imagine Derek and I are going to discuss like how meetings for open are going to work in aluminum, and we might make tweaks or something like that. But one possibility would be to like alternate between this, you know, working group and docs clinics or something like that. So it's even at a regular time in the week and stuff like that. So
that's a good idea.
Yeah, that's a really good idea, because are we right now like twice a month with this docs working group, or what's the current cadence?
Is it twice a month, or is it just every other week?
Every other week, which works out to twice a month. So
mostly, yeah.
So
except for like October, that's long, right, or whatever. And then we'll miss a few in November and December, right? Because we'll be on vacation in the U.S.
Yeah, let's reserve the right to cancel the December ones.
Right? Yeah, and that's fine. I think that it's the thing that I've really noticed for me and the way that I work is that I set aside time each week to do the things that just have to get done that nobody wants to do, like grooming, blocked tickets, right? And just start going through some of that stuff and and I can't get through all of it. So I set aside a couple hours every week and just do it. And it's a similar thing that if we do the clinics, I think that's why Wayne's approach is really good, where he has 2 different time slots and he just does those. And it's not always, I mean, I think you have is it an hour and a half? And I don't think you always use all that time, but sometimes you do. And
yeah. And I would say it definitely depends. You know, sometimes it's like, okay, I'm just gonna go, and other times it's like, I mean, there have been times where I've done in less than an hour, and it's like, okay, well, this is all I'm gonna do today because I have other things I need to get to.
And I'm done, so we're done. Yeah, and you just
like
call
today's, it was, you know, an hour and 45 minutes, and we're bumping up on the open hour, and I was like, and I still have a couple more hours of testing to do on this issue. But, you know, that's one of the joys. I suspect documentation will be a little bit better because most of the time you won't have to like figure out how to use some new technology like with Tornado.
Hopefully.
We should in the future too, though, Wayne, have like collaborative docs and test work together, because you know, there's a lot of potential for like testing a doc, such as even just syntax testing, and ensure is this even correct Python or YAML or whatever in this example.
Yeah, for sure. There's actually, I don't think we do it, but I know there are ways to, well, yeah, I know there are ways to like run some automatic tests on doc strings and things where you can just be like, here's the documentation. I want you to actually run these code samples and do that with with regular Python syntax, you can actually use, it's the doc tests
Yeah.
library.
Sphinx. Is that a Sphinx one or is that just a different?
I was going to say there might be a Sphinx plugin, or I'm sure there's a Sphinx plugin, but there's actually one for just like native Python, because if you add like the triple brace, like a REPL, and you add code in there, if you run doc test on your module, then it will actually search for all of those code samples and then run that, and whatever, if the output ends out different, it'll barf and blow up. So your examples have to be like actual Python code that runs.
Yeah,
So it's really neat, because like you actually get this process of like, oh yeah, that runs. I know that this example that I've thrown in here is good, but ours are, you know, we've just got like chunks of YAML in there or something.
Yeah.
So it's definitely not the same. But
Like,
that would
yeah.
actually be kind of neat if we could come up with a way to do that wouldn't be super noisy and gross.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
it
Like I
could
could
get
see a
noisy.
really good step one being like just a linting, some kind of lint syntax check in those examples before,
Yeah,
and then the later end goals being like, now let's see if we could actually have examples get run. And
Yeah.
like you said, a way that's not noisy, because I feel like the result will be a lot like the pre-commit things right now, is if we're not careful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This almost sounds like one of the, like in old sitcoms when sometimes they'd have an in-joke where a character from a completely different sitcom would come to another sitcom. It's going to be like that, you know, where docs and tests together, that kind
Yeah,
of
the
thing.
crossover episodes.
Right,
The
the
crossover.
crossover.
Docs and tests.
Right.
Yeah.
We'll just give
But
docs a stream too.
I think that it's a good crossover though, because it's still it's just like it's like internal communication. I still want to run stuff by, you know, the tech writers, because I'm like, hey, but I need you guys for this. You know what I mean? And just like with SRE, and they've been starting to do like SOPs, you know, and setting operating procedures. I'm like, but I want docs to look at this too. And so it's the same thing with testing, because we have docs on testing,
Right.
and you guys will get real involved in those pretty soon, I think, because I think there's been some major changes as we've gone forward with the test clinics and writing tests and getting more involved in it. And I think that's been really great. So it's definitely a crossover.
And I know Pedro, when he did that blog post, because I think we wanted to look at, okay, are there things in the blog post and that don't exist in the docs related to testing that should like also exist there? Or, you know, has Wayne, as you've been journeying through a lot of the test stuff, it could be like, hey, we should maybe review our that big pie test, the big testing and salt development doc. And I mean, even just looking at, you were just talking about, we were just talking about testing the docs or testing syntax and stuff. When I was actually doing the docs clinic or preparing for it, I found other errors, which I reached out to Wayne to be like, this doesn't look right. This looks like it wouldn't work. And so I put my PR that I was originally planning into a draft state, because I'm going to now go back and like go fix the examples. And
there were some fun ones.
Yeah, well, and this is an interesting thing, because this specifically, the K8s module, if I go in and I think I fixed the syntax right. Well, I'm not even using the Kubernetes module in any way. And so I really don't have a way to go, hey, the syntax, it looks like now it's more correct. Because the way I'm looking at it, I know the examples wouldn't work. Like I could tell the way that the quotes and stuff are being done is it's just not going to work, even though I've never run the Kubernetes thing before, the K8s one, since we have a few different execution modules around Kubernetes. But this one, it'll be the best of my ability kind of like correction, I guess. I don't really know. Because if someone said, we need to test this could very well be one of those really outdated modules that even if it was correct syntax wouldn't work, because it has yet to be updated to, you know, work with Kubernetes as is. Like, I
right.
don't know.
And Kubernetes changes so quickly
Yes.
that we're often out of date. So I think we're always out of date, actually, because it just changes so fast. We actually talked about putting a work group together just around the Kubernetes module because it changes so
We'll
much.
have an added incentive to do it soon too. So yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I see this is actually one of the things that dovetails really well with the future of how I see docs with a lot of these module tools. Like Kubernetes, for example. So when I think of AWS, when you think of any of the cloud providers, when you think of also Kubernetes tooling, we need to, the future of having item plugins really needs to, and I keep revisiting it because it just becomes more and more clear with situations like this, is we have to have code that writes code. Like if we could come up with standards around how an execution module works and what kind of commands are available to some kind of if it's targeting, let's say, the Kubernetes API, or if this is an AWS server that's a service that's built on top of Boto 3, all the docs for these tools exist. They're continuously evolving. And it'd be like the only way to honestly really keep up with at least a baseline, like a baseline CLI or execution module. States are a different story, but you know what I mean? Like, I feel like that'd be the future of like certain focuses, I think.
Yeah, and we kind of have started to go that direction as we, and it's interesting how it comes about because it starts with like a deprecation of a module, right? And then we start kind of talking about, well, we should have a policy around this, or we should have a standard around this, and that's becoming more and more apparent around some of these modules. That I almost wonder if we need a SEP that talks about some of those specific standards that we've kind of touched on, like this is actually how they should function if they're part of core, if I can get that out, you know, and this is how, if you wanted to spin them off and make them your own project, that they could, you know, then you're free to do what you want. But then that would give us some of that ability to start what we've talked about all along, which is to separate out the 525 modules that we currently have, and you know which ones are core to salt and not documented, and which ones have good examples, and which ones are being used, and I think that's just part of it. But I think that's the beginning part. We kind of need to start with that. This is a standard, right?
Yeah.
Or a policy around it or something. I'm not sure. Guideline. I'm not sure what we're going to call that. I always go back to the word standard, and that's probably not correct, but that's what I think of.
No, yeah, I suppose that also kind of goes hand in hand too with the templating ideas that are starting to come out around item with what are our like our minimum baselines, not necessarily just for docs, but for how the tool will, what tests it has to pass, these kind of things, because that would mean even revisiting definitely revisiting the item documentation and POP documentation and Tiamat, I guess, but to make sure that they're all showing. I mean, they've gone through a lot of version revisions since their docs were first published. Yeah.
On that note, like of creating a standard for modules, let's make sure we have a doc standards too, you know, especially for the doc strings and things like that.
Love it.
I'm hoping like in the next release cycle to really devote some time to thinking seriously about effective API documentation. So maybe that will feed into a lot of it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I know we talked about the doc string standard and using like the Google standard, I think is what most people on the engineering team use. And it's like, well, let's make that kind of our standard. What do we need to do that? I guess we need a SEP.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That would actually allow for real, actual automated testings against doc strings, because right now you just can't. Since it's too Wild West, you'd break way too many things. And
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to make things more standardized and more repeatable so that we can test some of that stuff a little quicker, because we're just too big. There's no way that we can do this stuff manually anymore.
Yeah, because it'd be just so awesome to go, because I mean, I've been fixing a few of these tickets where it'd be so awesome to just know automatically, oh, this parameter or this argument in this function's undocumented. And if it was
or this
following,
Quark or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And if it was following the Google or some kind of docstring standard,
Any standard.
any
Yeah.
standard, then we could have a test that actually is going through to say, oh, I see these are the args and this one's not included in the docstring. So
Yep.
yeah,
I think there's a lot that we could do there in a smaller amount of time, and I'm interested to look at that. And so as we get into that next planning session, Elisa, I think that'll be the budding part of it. I'll be interested to move forward there
Well,
and help
and
with what I can.
I think it'll benefit enterprise too.
Absolutely.
oh yeah, because if we start to create, you know, more salty standards, so
Salty standards. I like it.
well, okay, so that's that. I know that was a huge amount. Probably was that the first documentation clinic tangents, or all those questions?
Well,
resolved
I
to
was
these?
actually so I actually had considered that you had migrated to talking about the last agenda item, which was the supporting documentation for item and salt related open source.
Yes.
So did you want to say your last? I don't want to like steal too much time away from the documentation jam planning. We want to make sure we talk about that today. But
Oh,
but
yes. With that being
but
next week.
yeah. But do you want to say something quick about your meeting with Dave Boucher?
Yeah. So a lot of things came out of that. I pretty much had a lot of ideas and wanted to hear also where he was coming from. And we had a lot of the same ideas. And then he added a bunch more. We've created like a small Google Doc that I'm going to create into a much more formalized doc that has pretty much the layout and plan of what we would want in. Because so right now a tool PopSeed is used to create the skeleton of a new pop project or like an item project, and which is pop based, so that's why it's using PopSeed. But it gives it just enough for you to go, okay, this is enough to have like the working skeleton of this of a plugin with the hub and the plugin oriented programming pieces for you to just get started, and for you to maybe pick the dependencies if it's going to plug into other tools. It doesn't create a lot of the things within a repo, because this is the problem. This is the stuff we talked about with the complexities of decentralized projects. And in the future also, if it coincides with pulling projects out of SALT to be in standalone modules, is that there should be a baseline of standard documentation. I don't know. My computer over there is ringing.
Needs your attention right this minute.
Yeah, and it definitely does not need my attention. So, yeah, I don't even know what that was. So, as a result, that's a lot of, it comes into a lot of conversation we talked about here. Our code of conduct files. We are a large community, and anything that's under the SaltSec org should include a code of conduct file that's pointing to the main SALT code of conduct file, so that every time our main one gets updated, because it's a representation of the community, then it's reflected that anyone can click on the link in those other repos. For example, what is the reporting process for security with CVEs if someone finds a vulnerability? Right now, people have to go into our docs and they have to go find the security page, which details that information. But a repository standard is to have a security.md right in the root that has that exact information. And honestly, that should be reflected in anything under the SaltSec org that is open source, because we'd want to follow that same process. That if someone finds a vulnerability, if certain item tools like Item AWS, or even like there's account or ACCT, which is our item-based credential management tooling, we'd probably want a clearly stated vulnerability reporting process for tools like that right directly within the repo, so that people can know, oh, my plugin, which uses that as a dependency, and how I'm handling my credentials has a security vulnerability. Now that there was a formal process to announce it, rather than here's a 0 day or something. So, so there's that. There's also just basic questions that should be asked in the README, so that it's not just a blank README where they type in a sentence and go, I'm good.
Yes.
Yes. And so that we should have a bunch of prompts that say, that give them a place to start that they need to minimally respond to.
Yes, some required stuff and some stuff that's maybe even just good to have or nice to have. Because I think that there's a lot of times I go to the README and I'm like, well, that was not really helpful. I still don't
Yeah.
know what this repo is.
Yeah.
You know?
I think there's one repo right now in POP. I think it's like to make releasing and publishing to Python projects to PyPI easier. And all the README says is this makes it easier, but it doesn't
Yes.
actually explain how to use it. And so
Yes.
that's pretty frustrating to people.
Mhm.
And
There's a few like that. And then there's some that are
yes.
really extensive, like Pop Awesome gives you a lot of information, but I don't know that it's the information that I need.
Yeah, that's
Right.
like a link library pretty much,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, which is what the awesome semantics are.
Right.
I could just say that though. You know what I mean? Like, I think that we're
you
not
could throw that in there.
explicit. Right. You know, and I was like, I think this is just some links.
Collection of awesome tools. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it did, but maybe it doesn't.
I think it may now, but I remember looking at it the first time and being like, so what's Pop Awesome? And it wasn't nearly
Yeah.
as filled out as it is now. So I was like,
Yeah.
And I think that there's a time when we're all just talking about stuff in R&D, and it's hard for even me to capture the critical information to tell the story because it's evolving so quickly. But I think that we can ask some really basic questions when you're creating a repo, that even if that changes, fill it out for what it is today.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's some other things there that we can do that I'm actually interested in as well. Like you were talking about vulnerabilities, and we could also link into mailing lists and communication tools automatically when there are CVEs, and we're not doing that today. And that's a wheel that's already been built. We're just not using it. And so there's some other things there too that we could also start to cross-pollinate to make ourselves faster and to get the information out to people, because we're just bigger than our tiny little core team.
Yeah. I was just thinking about that as you brought that up, because especially as we migrate into pop land and people potentially have a lot of needs, you know, they might have 45 different plugins installed from as many different authors.
Yep.
So if one of those has a has a CVE, then suddenly, like, I mean, obviously it's kind of it's flexible, but the good steward in
Yes.
me, we should have a security mailing list, and when there are and RSS, we've got a security mailing list and RSS feed, but we should have a security mailing list and feed. So when there are issues with pop things, contributors, maintainers can submit that to us, and then we can send that out on our communication as well with whatever timing makes sense.
Yes.
And that feels like a thing that we should be planning for, because if history has taught us anything, it's going to happen. So we shouldn't be planning for if, but when. And when it happens, how can we make life the best
for us, right? And I would love to see us also use our own tooling to make this automation happen. There's a lot of stuff in place, but then there's just not the dots connected to it, or the states, or whatever needs to happen, or that there's a Lambda function out there to go and run a schedule or something like that. That we have sort of the pieces, and we need to connect some of those together and then iterate on the pieces that have already been built. And I don't think that takes long, but we're still kind of in this, but I was told I have to do this, and so I'm working on that. And but this is our bread and butter. This is who we are, and this is some stuff that we just gotta do.
Yeah,
gotta make time for it.
And I was gonna say, and that is the key right there. It's funny because our last discussion, whenever it was, and I was talking to Lisa about the choose your own adventure deal, right? And my thought initially was, oh, well, I'll just, we'll put something on the calendar eventually and do something. I thought, that's dumb.
Because we'll never get to it, right? Yeah, it's like, let's do it
Exactly.
now while we're thinking about
So
it. Yeah.
I'll throw something out there now. And yeah, it's not fully formed. It's not fleshed
Okay.
out. It's in my own personal repository, but it's something out there where we could take a look and we could say, yeah, seems sane, or this is totally off the wall, or whatever. And
That's out in your fork.
that is in my GitLab repository. So GitLab Wayne W / choose your own salt venture, I think. It's
Okay,
If
if
you
it's in
look in-
GitLab, I can find it too.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
also if you look at our chat history in the Open Docs channel on Enterprise, you can find our conversation there. So
Because I think that's our answer to the impediment that we've had this whole time of like, I can teach you how to add and subtract, or I can teach you trigonometry, and we need something to bridge that gap, right? And I think that's our answer, because we're like, but there's so many things. It's like, yeah, this is how we're going to get there, but we never get the time to do it. So we have to make the time to do it here and there. And that would be another really good option for, like, I don't know if it's a docs clinic, or maybe that one's more like a docs jam, to do something like that, where we could take any doc, pick one, and kind of see if we can fit it into that type of template of choose your own adventure. Because I think many of them you can.
Yeah. I mean, almost every piece of documentation that we have today flows from that kind of, I have a problem.
Here's the easy, and here's kind of the easy setup, but here's all the difficult stuff.
Yeah, it's like which one of the problems are, and then, because that's the issue right now is, unless you have spent time with salt, unless you really
intimately know it,
at least have an inkling of an understanding about salt, you haven't, you're just screwed. You won't have a clue where to look, or how to find anything, or even have an idea about what you might possibly do. People come to salt and it's like,
we don't even give them a path to search very well. You kind of have to know the keyword that you're looking for, and you don't need, you have to know, it's like, I have to know the right question to ask. And it's like, well, that's not very fair. We should help you.
And when some of the terms are as overloaded as they are, like every file is an SLS file, it's very difficult when you're starting out. And so, but to your point, we just have to take the time, and that's really what it is we just have to take the time and say, okay, I'm going to spend, in my case, I'm going to spend 30 minutes and just hack something together, put it out there. And then that's out there, and it's not just an idea in my head. There's something concrete, and now there's an option to start going and fleshing that out.
And I'm also thinking that we've kind of done it in the open team a lot, and I think it's kind of our dumping ground to say, oh, we're going to do that in the next planning. We're going to do that in the next planning. And that's kind of like our catch-all or our inbox for stuff we want to do. But we need to also start separating some of that stuff out into like, well, maybe that isn't like a planning release cycle thing. Maybe that's like a goal of an individual, or something, and they work on it over a quarter instead of over a release cycle.
Well, and I think if you're looking at like the Eisenhower matrix, right?
Right.
We have a lot of things that are important, but not urgent. And
we have so many urgencies.
Yes. And that's the problem, I think, that we fall into, is there's a lot of things that are urgent, but not as important. And so because the order should be important and urgent.
Right. Top.
Important and not urgent.
But we fall into that a lot.
And urgent and not important.
Right. Oof.
But and so that's really, I think, what it boils down to, is we have a strong tendency to fall into the urgent but not important.
Yeah. And I think that's difficult. Do we need to talk about the docs jam? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was trying to be like, hey, everybody, can we talk about the Docs Jam? We've only got 5 minutes. Maybe we should just schedule another follow-up meeting to just make sure that all our ducks are in a row for the Docs Jam, and we can just have a dedicated meeting to just make sure that everything's okay with that. Does that sound like the best course of action?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Kind of like we did with the clinic, just meet for like 15 or 20 minutes, probably the day before in this case.
Okay.
That's good.
I think the only thing I want to mention is that since we're getting close to the date, it's probably about time that we need to be scheduling the Docs Jam Zoom room hosts. So just a reminder of that task that I think all the other major tasks are done, but that's the only one I can think of that probably still needs to be put in place. So
What, like separate Zoom rooms, or
Are we
do
gonna
we
do?
have breakout rooms?
yeah, let's clarify really fast. I think we're gonna do breakout rooms for the 3 tracks. Is that right?
Mhm.
And then we
That's
need
what I
at least one team member to be like, we need somebody
Like a
in those
host in
breakout
each
rooms,
room?
Yeah.
you know, that kind of a thing. And it'd be good to build in redundancies too, like maybe have 2 people.
Some backups.
Maybe I'm flexible, but yeah. So that's a task that we still need to do.
Well, I think that you have to be like in a meeting in order to do breakout rooms.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's a good idea to kind of know what you're doing, because you can either tell Zoom, just put people in breakout rooms, or you
Mhm.
can assign everyone individually. And so it's kind of good to know a little bit of a plan going forward if we want to have some hosts, but I guess some of it will kind of depend on how many people show up.
It looks pretty easy. So
It
I've
is.
never actually used this feature, but clicking, you can like assign somebody, you can rename the breakout room. So
Yep.
Yeah. If you want, we could do a dry run of that too. Like I did that one time when we were going to do it for Salt Study Group. I just met with Serena and Adam and we just tested it all out, and now
Yeah.
we're going to this breakout room, and now so that you can see what the tech is like. It does help,
Yeah.
so that you feel confident with it.
Because if somebody drops and they come back to the main room. So someone needs to be in the main room that can also put them back into whatever.
Right.
breakout
Somebody needs to
room.
be in the main room, like managing traffic.
I
Yep.
figured
And
that'd
so
be
then
me.
that's fine. So the main room can be a track, and then people will default to that. And then
Yeah.
we can put them back somewhere else, or however you guys want to do it. It's just
Yeah.
little nuances like that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. My plan is just to basically hang out in that main Zoom room for that whole day. So
Yeah, that sounds like a great plan. I am on PTO tomorrow, so I can't meet tomorrow, but I am available the rest of next week if we want to do a meeting. Who wants to spearhead that? Do you want me to schedule it, or what should we do?
You want to do it, Cassandra?
yeah, we can do it.
Okay.
Do people want Monday afternoon or Tuesday afternoon?
I'm in favor of earlier.
I'm in favor of
later,
Monday. Yeah.
Monday. All right.
although my Monday afternoon looks bad, but we could probably bump we have an open docs triage meeting that we can bump, and
We
we
do.
can also shift around our documentation meeting.
Yeah.
So we can
All right.
be flexible. So
Let's decide on a time and date now.
Okay.
I'm looking at like 11 Mountain on Monday, but really any time is fine.
I can do 11:30, but not 11. But I don't know that I'm integral, and you guys could just give me assignments.
Those would both work for me.
I have a standing meeting with support at 11, but that only takes like 5 minutes. So
Okay. And Sage
Okay.
just said 11:30,
Mhm.
and Derek said 11:30. All right, we'll do 11:30.
Cool.
I will get that scheduled right now.
Sweet.
thank you for
So
doing
next-
that, Cassandra.
Yeah.
Next
you're
week, my
welcome.
kids go back to school half time. So my
Mm.
schedule is really nuts. So sorry about that.
That's okay.
Whoa.
As if it could be more nuts. Yeah. Crazy times.
Stormy all of a sudden here.
It's
Oh,
stormy.
really?
I just looked outside and like the sky's gray and my maple tree's going crazy, blowing around.
Oh,
Oh wow, crazy.
well, it's 100 degrees here.
It's like 65 here. I don't know.
It's pleasant here. So
And windy. This was a
all
good,
right.
good meeting.
Yeah, really good conversations, and that's why it was a good conversation. I didn't want to cut you off. I was just like, we need to talk about Docs Jam. So good stuff. All right.
All right.
See
Is
you
that it,
later.
everybody? Okay.
Yeah.
Bye.
That's a wrap. Have a good